Good morning. Welcome to this gathering of Unity of Bernie online for Sunday, March 7th, 2021. I'm Reverend J. Mulkey, and I'm so glad that you're here with us, as I am every week. As we navigate what are difficult times, it's a blessing to be able to come and speak with you, members of the congregation, as well as those who have tuned in, maybe for the first time or have discovered our presence through this online venue. So welcome, and let this morning where you are be a place of peace inside you, for you, knowing that God expresses as you, no matter what, through everything that you may be going through. This is a time to remember who you are. Matter of fact, in our church, when we meet, we recite our mission statement, and that is Unity of Bernie is a vibrant, loving, spiritual community providing a sacred space for personal growth. We honor and celebrate the Christ within all people. I invite you to be part of our gatherings as we feel that the time is coming where we can get together and do this under the guidelines that have been prescribed with the social distancing, hand sanitizer, all the things that you've heard about throughout this. We feel like, throughout this whole ordeal, we feel like the time is coming for that to be done in a safe and responsible way. So look forward to seeing you. Under the normal conditions, we meet at 121 Scenic Loop Road in Bernie, Texas, every Sunday at 11 o'clock. And for now, there is a book study that is held at Sundays at 7 p.m. by Zoom. And we're studying in this group the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Not that there's anybody that's overtly racist in this group or has those leanings, but we learn in this book study how to relate and assimilate our experiences with those of our brothers and sisters to make a world that works for everyone. And that's what I uphold and affirm during these times that we meet. No matter the venue, no matter the situation, that we are one in our intention. So I look forward to seeing you, as I say, hopefully very soon. And that'll be announced on this Facebook page, at our website at unityofbernie@yahoo.org. If you don't receive our email, if you're not receiving contact from us, please let me know. Let the church know at unityofbernie@yahoo.org. Leave your contact information below if you'd like to be added to the list, and I'll make sure, or the secretary will make sure whoever you'll get on the list. So please leave your information. We'll tell you about things that are upcoming. This morning, I want to talk about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart: the courage to begin again. And as you all know, it is not my practice to read anything that I do when I'm speaking. My messages are memorized, but there are some things that to me are so powerful and that I feel led to share with you that warrant a reading of a paragraph here and there, and I'll be talking about that in just a moment. I'd like to read the daily word for this Sunday, March 7th, 2021, which is world peace. It reads, "The road to world peace begins with my open-hearted acceptance of those who are different than me. Our world is vast and diverse, and its people come from a wide variety of cultures and history. The more I learn about those whose lives differ from mine, the more I can appreciate their perspectives and empathize with their struggles. When I make the decision to understand others, I discover that judgment fades and the light of compassion. Today, I sow peace through my acceptance and understanding. Peace in the world grows as I join my brothers and sisters in celebrating the glory of human diversity and affirming oneness in God. And the scripture reading from the Daily Word is from Isaiah 2, verse 4. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And we affirm that as we have found that our world has rapidly become smaller through this time of looking after ourselves and other people, and knowing that our very experience with one another has ramifications, especially during the acute phase of what we've gone through. As Jesus prayed, Father, I pray, his desire was that we may all be one. And we are. Just, I don't think sometimes we always recognize it. But what I wanted to be able to share with you this morning is about the courage to begin again. I think every one of us agrees that life takes courage, and that sooner or later something's going to happen that demands and calls for the very best in us. And some years ago, more years than I care to remember, I found a set of books by Baird Spalding that was called The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. And an interesting story behind this, of me discovering this for myself. I never knew that the laundromat that was close to my house would have so much spiritual material. It's where I discovered the Daily Word in 1983. It was where people would place magazines and books for folks to read while their clothes were washing or drying. And I had a great relationship with the man that owned the place. In fact, he was like a second father to me. And many times just going up there, and I'm sure you all can relate to this, there was a Coke dispenser that put out red soda and a peanut dispenser, and I used to pour those peanuts in that red Coke or red drink, and it was just wonderful, wonderful, great memories of growing up. And so at that time, and that was way before I started reading the literature, I had been around this laundromat for about 15 years and found one of these books. I think it was volume 2, and this was volume 2 of the Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East, and it was right around the time that I had found the Daily Word. And one of the paragraphs stood out to me and would like to share that with you this morning. It follows. It has been clearly stated that life lived by the majority of men and women is hypnotic. That is, they are not living life as it was intended to be at all. Not 1 in a million feels the freedom to live what he or she inwardly feels he should live. He has come under the world's opinion of himself, and this opinion is what he obeys rather than the laws of his own being. In this respect, he is only living in a material world, a mere human being who only hopes to escape it when he dies and goes to what he calls heaven. This is not the determination intended in the plan and purpose of life. Obedience to one's inner nature, the expression of life as he instinctively feels it ought to be expressed, is foundational to the life that the masters feel is the only true mode of living. You are not this body you are in. That comes and goes. You are divine intelligence within. And that was compiled by a man named Baird Spalding, who went to the Far East, who studied with a group of other men in the easternmost part of India, learning that the spirit expressed individually through a person rather than the Western idea that Religion was a corporate thing. I mean, with lots of people following the same rules, the same ideologies. It was an individual thing, as Mr. Spalding. Life was an individual proposition, as Mr. Spalding published. This was in 1896. And it's interesting how the life and teachings of the Masters of Far East, and I highly recommend you get it if you can. It's a 6-volume set, and it's spread out over a period of time that that his experiences being with these masters and learning is cataloged in these books, and it is exactly consonant with what Unity teaches and understands, that the spiritual life is individual, that we go by our own experience, and then in being true to the deepest part of our being, we're able to touch others authentically. And this other important thing that happened at that laundromat was my first coming across the Daily Word. And I have this, after all these years. I had made a copy of it when Daily Word put their vintage material online. In other words, if you subscribe to Daily Word and you have access to computer and internet, of course, you're able to go back and print or read those words that meant, you know, something to you, or just because you're curious. Well, the words that meant so much to me had to do with beginning again. And I made a copy of this that I refer to every now and then. And I'd like to share that with you right now, because at the time that I found this, I had just discovered unity, just discovered truth, and I was facing a challenge. More about that in just a moment. But the Daily Word that I read was from Monday, August 22nd, 1983, and it reads, "Begin again. I can begin again. There are persons who feel trapped by circumstances because they think it's too late to begin again. Anyone, anywhere can begin again. We can change the direction of our thoughts. We can rise out of our guilt feelings. We can start over, for we have a special friend inside ourselves. We are spiritual beings, and as spiritual beings, we are needed to take the steps that can free us from self-defeating places in consciousness. We are spiritually strong, spiritually capable. We have our own special gift to give to life. We realize and actualize satisfaction in living." And the scripture reading for that day was from Colossians 1:27, "Christ in you, the hope of glory." Each one of us, in his or her own way, are going to be called on to begin again at some time. And right now, we're being called on to begin again after this pandemic begins to ebb, after life begins to come back to some form of normal. And as I've talked about so many times, we will be the inhabitants of a world waiting to be born. And I think it can seem overwhelming, because right now we feel like we're separated and divided from the activities that we love to be a part of. So there's going to be what I'd like to refer to as a re-entry period, as we begin to take up the activities of normal life, albeit slowly, but in the direction of making our world and entering our world, making our world a different and better place, both individually and collectively. It demands a form of beginning again. It's going to take that. Form. And my experience that I'd like to speak to you about this morning was something that was not as, of course, grand and big as what we're all facing. It was an individual time where I had to make a decision that no matter what, that either I was going to commit to truth from then on, or I was going to feel buffeted and shaken by the world's experiences. And I made that commitment in 1983. Up till that time, I had been using the material, the literature, for more of the worldly success. I was involved in a job that had to do with interacting with people and competition and things that I was enjoying at that time, and I would use the literature from Unity and New Thought and Science of Mind to bolster the feeling that I was able to do this, that I was powerful. I affirmed certain things and found that to be workable, but also began to find out that with every success, there was a concomitant idea of what's next. How am I going to top myself? What is, there was what you call the high of the success, followed by the idea, well, I have to do it again, and again and again. And this constant back and forth was something that I was doing in my infancy of learning about truth. But as I began to read further, and particularly Dr. Katie's Lessons in Truth, the foundational textbook of Unity, I began to realize that what she said in the book was true, that the time had come for us not just to seek a creed for something that we wanted, but for living a life. And although I didn't do it perfectly at that time, it was something that I began to think about long term. Did I want to be up and down regarding my circumstances, using what I had learned only to affirm success in a venture, and not embracing the whole of what was available to me to straighten my thinking out and to commit to truth? And I made that commitment in 1984, and more or less I found it that I have followed that, and as the older that I've gotten, the more that I have been able to embrace that. I think we are part of what the psychiatrist Carl Jung talks about in his the archetypes of life. There's the warrior to begin with. We need to go out and prove ourselves. And then as time goes by, we become more reflective and analytic. But one of the things that I appreciated about New Thought, Unity in particular, was the emphasis on the idea that you could begin again no matter where you were, no matter what you'd gone through, no matter the circumstance. It was within your power to take a moment, in the moment, which is all we have, and correct the course and walk in newness of life. I found that the New Thought writers actually were truer to what I felt the words of Christ Jesus were than many of the fundamentalists, because Jesus continually talked about new life and didn't attach a burden of guilt to a person who was seeking a new life in his presence. It was always rise up and walk, go forward. There wasn't a lot of ideas about recrimination. In fact, there were none. It was, what can you do right now? And I'm going to help you with that. And people in his presence were healed. And people in his presence today are still healed, because the truth is the ground of our being to the extent we recognize it. Well, I love going off in some direction sometimes, but the personal story so many years ago, it so happened that not very far from that laundromat, and I must have had a whole lot of karma with this area, because right next to the laundromat was a Baptist church that I attended with a girlfriend I was dating. And I admit I attended that church just to be with her. And there were wonderful times, wonderful food. One of the things that's closest to a young man's heart, for me anyway, was girls and food. And so that church provided it. There were many wonderful people in it. The doctrines were not something that I agreed with. All right. So the laundromat was across the street from that, and then catty corner to that was a woman who had a great influence in my life, who was a Christian Science practitioner. So we had, it's very interesting, and I said it could only happen to me in this particular time, but it was the Baptist church, the laundromat, and the Christian Science practitioner. So when I began reading Unity, and I made this wonderful lady's acquaintance. Her name was Margaret Simons Copper. I said, I'm hearing things at this church from very, the people are very loving, but the minister is talking in ways that just, the idea of you got one life, and if you don't do it right, you die, you go to hell, and that's it, if you haven't done it right. And so I began to talk to Ms. Copper because I had met her at that very same laundromat, and she began to tell me to think of God as principle, that 2 + 2 always will equal 4, never 5, it can't, and that the world, the universe, and the laws of life were set up along principle, but that God wasn't cold principle, also appeared to us as we needed, as we found that God would appear to us in a form that we could understand. And so if it was compassion we needed, we would receive that. If it was strength, God would appear in that form. In other words, this force was intimately acquainted with us and loved us. So at the time of going through this, this fundamentalism, just to be able to date the girl I wanted, and the new thought that I was learning and wanting to exhibit in my life, there was left in the middle this feeling inside me like, I've got to be true to who I am, and I don't want to go up and try to tell a church how to be, but I realized it wasn't for me. And so I began attending more just to, my mind would wander in the church because I was learning other things. And when they talked about spirit in that church, I was thinking of New Thought and Unity. And the beautiful story about that is it wasn't very long until I discovered Unity, and Norman and Helen Olson, who were a husband and wife team at Unity of San Antonio, who were so important in my own spiritual growth and development. And I loved them. And I'll never forget his words. He said, God is not seeking you, he's chasing you. And so it was a matter of attending that church after I decided that I was going to move on, attending the Unity Church of San Antonio, and he put me to work pretty fast, learning and then asking me to teach. And from then it's been a wonderful, wonderful discipline and a wonderful way of life. The idea that I'd like to talk to you about right now is your own personal renaissance, your beginning again, in whatever manner or fashion you may need. All of us are going to be called on, regardless of who we are and where we are, to re-enter a world that will be made completely by the thoughts that we think. In other words, what we hold in mind will produce. We want to make sure that we're holding the best intention towards the collective that we're going to walk into. And the way we do that, I believe the best is when we hold the intention for ourselves, that we're going to be integrated, whole, and understand the part that we are given to play. Beginning again doesn't mean that you all of a sudden forget everything that's happened to you thus far. To me, it's more the idea of taking the situation and turning it towards your good. And we've talked about, I know I've talked about this before, where we see the positive in what was negative. Because if nothing else, I'm getting some messages that it's not, you're not hearing me well. So I just push the volume up as far as I can. And if you are hearing me better now, can you give a thumbs up and let me know? And I'm going to keep talking, but I believe this volume is up. Yeah, it's up as far as it can go. So I'll speak up even more. I don't want to be yelling at you, but life will mirror our intent in large part. And so whatever it is today that you're facing that is difficult for you, know that it's part of the curriculum of your soul's development. Gary Zukav wrote a wonderful book called The Seed of the Soul. And one of the things that he spoke about is that not only our actions mean something, but our overall intent. In other words, there's an intention toward life that we have. We may not know it, but it's contained in it is contained positive thoughts, negative thoughts, things we've been through, ideas we formed about those things, and we carry this egoic identity. And so the overall intent of your life can also be formative. It's indicative of the idea of what we call the sort of person that I am. The feelings we have about ourselves, both positive or negative. That's why I've said you can affirm and deny all day long, but if you're not believing it inside, not going to do you a lot of good. You have to be able to apply this to yourself in the situations that you find yourself in right now. And I've said if you know all the truth teachings in the world, but you can't give your own assent to them inside, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. So we have to not fear going inside to what Carl Jung also talked about as the shadow. The shadow being those things that we'd like to forget, in the corners of our mind, things that may have happened, predilections we feel about ourselves that we think aren't so good and we don't want anybody to know about necessarily. But true healing, a true beginning again, means you're not afraid to go inside and do what Louise Hay said, which I love. She likened cleansing the mind to taking a turkey pan after Thanksgiving, and you know how that looks after you've cut it up and everybody's eating and so forth. It's sticky with grease and all like this. You push the water on it until you have to really scrub it and get down to it and to make it clean. Inside ourselves, we have to do that type of job too. Otherwise, those things that we would like to have behind us will pop up again for healing. It's like, you ever tried to hold a ball in a swimming pool underwater? It takes a lot of effort, and eventually it's going to pop up. Another way of saying this is feelings buried alive never die. So you have the power right now. I have it. Anybody who watches has a power to make this correction to begin again in a true way. I think so many people make resolutions and put out some wonderful affirmations about their life, but they're carrying the past with them. And so they're defeating themselves because they don't want to look at what happened or what they're carrying. And the point of it is that very thing you want to forget and run from can be the fertilizer for a new life, for the seeds of making yourself new, letting God remake you. It's not so much trying to distance yourself from what was if you don't like it, but understanding, forgiving, and knowing that you did the best you could. Even if you feel you didn't, you were doing what you could with your knowledge and awareness at the time. So the self that you bring to this idea of beginning again is the truth inside your being, but you have to believe it. And the only way you're going to believe it is if you can let go of the hurts, particularly those things that you feel strongly about in a negative way. And we all have them, and that's why meditation is such a great discipline, because we're able to release those things that are not for our highest good, past things that we'd prefer if we could only forget. But there is a term that I love called landscaping it in. In other words, you take those things in your life, you don't run from them, you're no longer afraid of them, you've brought them up to be healed. And by a process of spiritual alchemy, they are the steps upon which you're able to walk up to your new beginning. It's not a matter of denying something never happened. It's a matter of accepting it, taking the lesson inherent in it, and knowing that truly there's no mistakes in your growth. The reason there are no mistakes in your growth is because you get to choose what you think about what you did or what happened. You are always at choice. So beginning again today may look like a number of things to many different people. And as I remember my talks with Ms. Copper and the wonderful, wonderful times where she would, you know, pour the tea and we'd sit down and talk. The hours would pass. She must have been very patient or enjoyed my company. She was considerably older than I was. Ms. Copper was at the time. I was in my mid-20s and she was in her mid-60s. But there was a point of contact that we made. I remember sitting there and looking at all those wonderful books that she had, the very warm, rich paneling of her home, the peaceful presence. I loved being there, the overstuffed chair and so forth. It felt good. And we discussed truth at length. And one of the things that she made the point about is that people try to make a new life while they carry the baggage of the old instead of releasing it and letting it go. And there are all types of metaphysical ways to do that, psychological ways to do that if you're not so inclined. Whoever you are and watching, there are ways to not separate yourself from what happened, but to realize that it is part of the flow of your life, it's part of the fabric of your life, and if you don't like it, you make another decision about it. This is where intention comes in. We have a world outside us right now that's going to demand our cooperation with it. Even if we feel like we've got everything under control with this, you know, our own selves, if, you know, there's nothing we need to stop or start or forgive ourselves for, there is a world that we're going to enter. It's going to demand cooperation. And demand is not a bad word in this case, because we know this, if anything that this has taught us, this pandemic, is that we affect one another, and we do so by our choices. And that's why everybody I know of a good will follows certain protocols that have to do with this virus. Hand sanitizing, wearing masks, and even though the governor of Texas made a decision that I strongly disagree with, and everybody has their own opinions, it's not that I'm here to get political, but I do feel we're in the infancy of everybody just now getting their footing, and I don't believe that it's necessary time to take our masks off. I don't intend to, and I hope you don't either. We are here also to look after one another, and that touches into an arena of the social, the arena of social justice, social action, whatever you may call it. But you know inside yourself, you honor the spirit within, you'll get the right answers when you go inside. And we know the Master said, do unto others as you would be done by. So whatever it is this morning that you feel constitutes a new beginning for you, whether it's walking towards the new life that's coming, or whether it's something that is hurting you, that is, you know, is not for your good, something that's laid you out, so to speak. It could be addiction. It could be dysfunctional relationships. It could be a past hurt that's never really been healed. Know that you carry that with you, but you also carry the power to overcome that. You get to do that by the choice you make. And if you're making the choice in the spirit of love that comes through you day and night and never has stopped, if you're making the choice in concert with that very spirit, you're going to overcome in ways that you may not dream. I look back on my life and I think about, I never dreamed how I'd get through this thing or that thing, but I did. And, you know, they say the evidence for it is I'm here. It may not have felt good at the time. It may not have been something I'd want to repeat, but I found that the lessons inherent in the experience were things that I wouldn't trade, because they pushed me to an area of growth that I needed. Growth isn't always fun, and it's not always exponential, and it's not always a straight line. There are going to be times that it looks like dips, starts, fits and starts, however you want to term it. You have to decide that you have an attitude that is making room for all that. Not just one way of doing it, But as time unfolds, as your intention unfolds, there are going to be situations that present themselves that seem like they have nothing to do with what you're trying to overcome, but you later find out they do. God does not orchestrate chaos. Your life is not a chaotic event. You are on purpose here. You have a mission to fulfill that no one else can. The wonderful author Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, posed a comment in his book Illusions. And he said, here is a way to find out if your mission in life is over. If you are here, it's not. There is something for you and for me to do that only we can. And we discover that through the courage it takes to look inside ourselves, to forgive ourselves, and to let the healing begin. Because as Louise Hay talked about with water in that turkey pan till you get it clean, the more force we allow to come through us, the more that we embody the truth of our being, the divine flow, the more we're going to heal, the brighter the light we're going to be, the better the example, the more we're going to be able to be helpful to others. It's very hard for one broken person to help other broken people. But when a person is responsible and has stood to the truth of their being, they become a beacon of light to those who may be broken by circumstance and who feel that in the presence of this person, they stand a little taller, they're a little stronger, and this example means a lot. Words can be said all day long, and I noticed in that fundamentalist church I attended, there were a lot of words meant to scare people. But the words that I loved so much is, you are a child of the Most High God. You have in your capacity and your ability you have it in you to take hold of this power, to let it do its job in you. And instead of using the power that comes through you in a human way to judge, categorize, analyze, if you let it literally, as the old hymn say, wash you clean, it straightens out the crooked places in you. So if the places that need the healing, the places that hurt the most, I believe that if we're real with one another, we're not afraid to say the things that come against us. It's not that we have to disclose every single thing about our challenge, but the more that we're willing to become real with one another and tell each other our stories and our truths, the more that we are following the truth, as I call it with a capital T. We all have facts of our lives, but they're not the truth. Yes, they happened, but now we can interpret them in a different way. J.K. Rowling, who writes the wonderful Harry Potter books, said, I found that rock bottom was the foundation for a new life. You see, she was able to take the situations that came to her and build upon them, and to be able to capitalize on a mistake, as you may call it, is to make that mistake no longer a mistake. It's not, this isn't a play on words, it is the truth. Because if you capitalize on what was a defeat and what hurt and all those things that have, that you felt have come against you, and you're able to turn it, turn a twist on it and realize that it can be the foundation for newness of life, then it wasn't a mistake after all. It's a mistake as long as you hold it against yourself. And if you need to go forth to a person that may have been offended or somebody you want to make amends to, that is in the way of things and wonderful. And as the 12-step programs say, do that as long as it doesn't cause the other person discomfort or they don't want it. It's wonderful to be able to say heartfelt, I'm sorry, didn't mean to apologize. I apologize, I didn't mean to hurt you, or I hurt you, and it was because I was hurting myself, and please these are wonderful things to do, but ultimately the responsibility is thrown back on us even after we make the amends. we still have the responsibility to mold and shape our own lives. And how are we going to do it? And in what attitude? The attitudes that we have and hold are the ground of what we're going to experience in the world. So allowing the truth to illumine you, and through meditation, that's my favorite practice. Allowing the truth to illumine you allows you to make a start that means something, and you're not going to continually be looking back over your shoulder saying, I wish I hadn't done that, I wish this was another way. That is all gone. As Christ Jesus said, I am life. Behold, all other things passed away. He was stood for newness of life. He stood for, saying, be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. That was the teaching of Christ. That's the teaching of really any master who realizes that we're here to master lives. As Bear Spalding said in the Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, we're here to be true to who we are. And when we're true to who we are, we're not going to be false to others. We're not going to be trying to manipulate or control others. We're going to realize our own integral wholeness and recognize that in others. And it's a chain reaction. And when we do that, we're upholding others through intentional ways of living. The intention that we hold for ourselves is in great measure the intention that we hold for others. We have to realize that you can't choose up sides on a round planet. That we are one. Doesn't mean that we don't have preferences, doesn't mean that there are things that aren't making us an individual, but that we are one as far as our lives are lived in this world. And because there are thought streams, there's consciousness raising, there's also consciousness lowering. And I believe that when you appeal to fear inside yourself or a group, you're appealing to the lowest vibrations of consciousness. But when you appeal to love and inspiration, you're vibrating at the highest form of consciousness. Things are going to work better. That turkey pan is going to get cleaned. You're going to say, I really feel new. Behold, I make all things new. And Christ Jesus said, these things that I do, you can do and even greater. It's all in how we accept and are present in the moment. How we interpret what we know and how open we are to finding another way. And my own beginning again, way back a long time ago, was the way that I was able, and I've done it, through the years. You have to course correct sometimes, but that's that seminal moment when I realized that the love of truth was more important to me than affirming a parking place, a sale, any of the things that I was doing in a business. Those are all fine, and they can be important, and they can be the very signposts that lead you to a study of truth. But then when you come into realizing that you want a life to live, and that there is something above the everyday ups and downs of life. There is something inside you that's not going to be, it's a thirst that's not going to be slaked, and it's a hunger that's not going to go away unless you are being true to the whole of your divine being. And the truth of that, to thine own self be true, you know. And I believe you know inherently what works and what doesn't, where you need to come higher, where you need to forgive, and it all happens in the moment that you choose and say, this is behind me, and I extract these lessons, and I'm ready to grow into the fullness of my being, with full forgiveness of myself and others, embodying the consciousness of the truth that made you. And then you walk forward and know that at times you may stumble, times you may not be all that you want to be, but you forgive it very quickly and you move on. That's the way life unfolds for the best. That's true growth. Getting our vaunted nothingness, as Emerson says, out of the way, so that we can be responders and reactors to the truth that animates us every moment. I hope that today you've received an idea or two or three that help you to make a choice in favor of yourself and of the world that we know is waiting outside us, that is being formed by our thoughts. See, there's an individual intention and a collective intention, and the collective intention most of the times follows our individual or group of individuals. You know, it's like certain people vibrate to a certain frequency, and that's where I'd like to tie in my experience with the church that I talked about attending to begin with. They were, to me, many of the people were so loving in that church that I spoke about earlier, but they were also a fearful group sometimes. They felt like they had to walk a step behind this God that they claimed they loved. And I know that many of them did, and they felt that they were even better than the God that they were worshiping, because they'd say, some of them would say, I can't imagine having my child in hell for eternity, but this is the way God says it, and that's true. You see, it was what they were willing to accept, and that's fine. This world is big, and there's diversity, but I found that most of them loved fellowship and the camaraderie, but were not so happy, and certainly not happy with the idea that they had of God, praying to a reticent God, praying that this God would forgive them enough not to send them into an eternal abyss. Extracting the lessons that I needed from that experience and finding the truth literature at the laundromat and making acquaintance with that wonderful woman who's now been gone. It's Margaret Copper. She's been gone for a number of years. The lessons that she taught and the way that she presented it to me, and those moments that she and I were able to talk, they are golden to me, and I'll never forget them. And they help guide me, and they help make me, for better or worse, what I am today. Seek inside yourself. Know the truth of your being. You can make your new beginning. You can make it count right now. And it will not only benefit you, it'll benefit the rest of us. Because when you believe in yourself, you're believing in the God that made you. And I'm talking about the true self, the unblemished, unvarnished truth of your being. Now you get out there and do it and make it what you want it to be. That's self-actualization, and that's self-realization of the greatest kind. So I'm glad that I was able to do a little autobiographical stuff this morning, because there are some things about my journey that I find comical, lovable, wonderful, mysterious, but I realize that for better or worse, it formed me into who I am today. And that is what I think we all have to do, realize those experiences came for a purpose and came to teach you more about the magnificence of your own being. Right now, I'd like to lead a meditation that helps us remember who we are and allows us to drop those negativities, those things that we've picked up perhaps through the week, yesterday, 10 years ago, whatever it may be. It's sort of like the starting point for us to realize who we are, to choose once again, as Course in Miracles says. So if you are sitting in a place that you're watching, or however the posture you may be, please be comfortable. Take a few deep breaths. Center yourself. Know where you are, feet on the floor, palms perhaps upraised, or in a comfortable position. And I kind of call this a prayer/meditation. And it's something that I do personally, not necessarily out loud, but I like to share with you. And we will affirm together and release some things together. And so I ask you to join me right now Just take a few deep breaths. Oh, infinite presence, we know you're right with us, right where we are. We sense your presence inside as a ball of golden light that pierces through the darkness of our own consciousness and the places that we haven't let your light shine. We feel this coming through us. In the very center of our being, it's like we realize that we are one at this moment with you, with the truth, with this wonderful warm light that goes through us and flows through us and begins to make the things that hurt feel better. We release the blockages and any awareness to your presence, to love's presence. And in this special time, we release any grievance we have against ourselves or other people. We know that you are the author of new beginnings. No matter the situation, no matter the circumstance, no matter the consequence, you have always been with us to the ability that we have recognized it. And we recognize it this morning, right now, as this loving, healing energy flows through every part of our mind, our emotions, and our bodies. Those things that we feel have come against us, we realize that they are things to be healed in your presence. And so we offer them to you to help us choose again and see with new eyes the possibilities, the unlimited possibilities for our own lives, for our growth, for our ability to touch the people we love and our world in a different way. And this wonderful light, its essence, flows through us from head to toe, making all things new. And wherever we need this love, wherever we need this presence, this energy, we apply it liberally right now. We are able, we're more than able. As it is said about us, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And we mirror this love right now because we feel it inside. Old hurts and blockages and ideas we've had about ourselves flow away in the presence of this mightiest force of all, the love and truth of our being. We thank you for your presence. We affirm your presence. And we know that you're here right now, standing beside us as you are every moment of the day. And we recognize it. And we are it. And we forgive ourselves and everyone else in this moment. And we're open to your guidance for new life by recognizing once again, or perhaps the first time, the wonderful presence of truth that abides in our hearts and our minds and our souls. We take another deep breath and we feel newness flowing through us. We feel remade in this moment. And that's what life is about. A series of moments well lived where we learn, where we live, where we forgive. It's my deepest prayer that something that I've said this morning touches you to realize the magnificence of your own being and the wonderful possibilities that you have in your life that you may not have looked at before because you're looking at them through the prism of personality. Realize that that's an idea you carry about yourself. And it's a thought, and a thought can be changed. Another way to say it is happiness is one thought away, and you get to choose. I'm so glad that you were here this morning. I'm so glad that I was able to once again share with you these ideas, and I look so forward to seeing you all in person. I hope that you will come to Unity of Bernie, as I call it, the house that love built, and that you'll be a part of this wonderful congregation of loving, caring people who will support you on your path. I've seen them do this. It really, truly is the house that love built. We right now, we miss each other very much, the physical presence we have that we enjoyed, a year ago. And we're looking so forward to being able to do things we love to do, eat together, hug one another, shake hands, all those things that comprised our physical togetherness. But we also know that in spirit there is no distance. And the spirit of love binds all of us, and those that we don't even know yet in a physical way binds us all. So our good comes to us. Your good comes to you, and you realize it. And I know that I don't need to tell you that to be able to do ministry, it takes funds. And I appeal to you to give your best gift. One of the things that I've seen in my life, and I know many others have because I've talked with them about it, is the law of giving and receiving. There's an old saying, you can't outgive God. The laws of the universe is that you give, and it's, even Scripture says, give and it shall be given to you. Pressed down, shaken together, running over, will it be given to you. That's an Old Testament, I believe from Malachi. But the idea is the circuitry of giving and receiving is one and the same. And the more we give with a happy heart, with an idea of expectancy of blessing, it seems the more we receive. But I ask you to remember us in your giving, in your tithes and your donations this morning. And please send your gifts to Unity of Bernie, P.O. Box 1973, Bernie, Texas 78006. That's P.O. Box 1973, Bernie, Texas 78006. Or I believe there's a PayPal button you can press if you prefer to do your giving online. However you feel comfortable with it, I invite you to give your best gift this morning, and know that as you give, it's given unto you. And you are helping us make this ministry even more than it already is, and all that it can be, and all that we affirm that it's going to be, and that it is right now. And we see that expanding and touching the lives of others and making a difference in the lives of people that we've yet to meet physically. I invite you to take your gift in your hand. And if you don't have it right now, you can visualize it between your two hands. And you can say with me what we have said at our service, which is, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, and I send it forth with my blessings and my love. This physical act of letting your hands go is just the reminder that it comes forth from you with your love, with expectancy of blessing, and with the knowledge that you are making a difference by helping ministry and people. And that's really what ministry is, grow to all that we can be. God bless you, and thank you for your gifts. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for being the best part of unity, best part of New Thought. Whatever it may be, whatever path you follow, that you're true to your heart and to yourself. I look forward to seeing you again next week. And until then, remember the prayer that we say to close our services. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Keep safe. Observe those rules for our togetherness. And know that as you're doing that, you're blessing yourself and others. And we'll be together before you know it, physically. God bless you until next week.